Devout Muslims pray to the Kaaba in Mecca 5 times a day. But where does the black stone in the Kaaba, the holiest relic in all of Islam, come from? Where does it originate? Well, the story is a lot stranger than you may think. My name is Grayson. Welcome to another Based Theory. This time, we're going to look at the black stone, an enigmatic, mysterious Muslim relic that is shrouded in mystery. Even Islamic sources admit that the black stone and the Kaaba predate Muhammad and Islam. In fact, in pre-Islamic Arabia, there were reportedly a number of Kaabas, which were seen as safe havens or pilgrimage sites or gathering places for all the different deities and icons and religious artistry and iconography from all over the region. So in the Kaaba in Mecca, for example, it was said to contain over 360 icons and gods from all different Arabic pagan religions. There was a white stone in one Kaaba, there was a red stone in another Kaaba, but what about black stones? Now, in the Islamic tradition, the black stone is said to have fallen from the sky to show Adam and Eve where to build the very first altar of the very first temple to God. This temple was then washed away in Noah's flood, but the black stone was then refound and the temple rebuilt by Abraham. And Muhammad himself is even to have said to have placed the black stone in the Kaaba at 5 years before his prophet and vision and all that stuff even started, which we'll get to that. But there are very scant records of any kind of black stone in Arabia before this time. But that's not to say that there were no black stones as a part of any Arabic-based religion in the historical record. Far from it. You see, 700 years before Muhammad, there was a dynasty of Arabic priest kings who presided over a religious political system of which they were the head of the religion of the cult of worship of a black stone. This black stone was worshipped like a god, and the Arabic dynasty was seen as the divinely appointed rulers both of the political entity of the state of that time and of the religion centered around this black stone, which worshipped the stone as a sun god. This god and the black stone worship, even though it was based within Syria, actually maintained a lot of its Arabic cultural roots. It was fairly common within Arabic polytheism around this time to have a sort of sanctity and a worship of natural places, whether that be rock formations or certain stones or other kind of natural occurrences like trees or even meteorites. This family of priest kings presided over their city-state in Syria as well as the surrounding areas up until about the time of the Roman Empire, where initially they were a client state of the Romans, for example, backing Julius Caesar in his civil wars, and then later on getting involved in Augustus's civil wars after that, until eventually being full-scale conquered by the Romans and taken over. But that doesn't mean that this dynasty of priest kings over the Black Stone completely went away. Quite to the contrary. Connected with the Roman trade networks, there's actually evidence of this god in text written as far away as the Netherlands, acknowledging the sun god Elagabalus. And during one of the many Roman civil wars that would occur in the later imperial era, one of the contenders who successfully becomes emperor and founds an entire imperial dynasty, Septimus Severus, who, by the way, probably the coolest name of any Roman emperor for my money, who founds the Severan dynasty. Well, he was married to a Syrian priestess, part of this family in the worship of the Black Stone. So his entire line is coming from a background of at least partly this family that oversaw the Black Stone. And eventually, in the year 218, a 14-year-old boy would inherit the throne of the Severan dynasty as the Emperor of Rome. And this boy, named Elagabalus by history, was also the high priest of the cult of the Black Stone. This boy would become the controversial and short-term emperor Elagabalus, who would only reign for 4 years, 4 very controversial years for many reasons. But we can just start with the religious ones, but this is going to go places. So Elagabalus didn't just go to Rome. He brought the Black Stone and his priests and built a temple for the Black Stone in Rome itself, the Elagabalium. And to make matters worse, he also took all of the holy relics from all of the other gods and temples in Rome and brought them into the Elagabalium in order to do any worship to these gods, you had to do it within the house of Elagabal, or Elagabal as the Romans called him. Now, elevating a black stone and some eastern sun god over Jupiter to the Romans was anathema enough. But to make matters worse, the emperor would participate in annual rituals with the stone, whereby the stone would be put on a chariot. Nobody else. There was no driver for the chariot. Nobody holding the reins up there. The stone was alone riding in the chariot, and it would be driven through the streets of Rome. And the emperor himself would be leading the chariot with running backwards, facing the stone and the horses and the chariot. And this was kind of seen as just sort of whimsical and shameful for an emperor to be doing. Now, on top of the religious controversies around Elagabalus and what he was doing at the Elagabalium and all this weird worship of black stones in the heart of Rome itself by the emperor, there was also a lot of sexual controversies around Elagabalus that is worth getting into because it's quite interesting in its own right. Now, Elagabalus had a lot of known male lovers, like athletes and strong men and men he would pick up at bars even. Being gay itself was not in and of itself that controversial in ancient Rome and Greece, although they did care that you were a pitcher and not a receiver, if you catch my drift. But Elagabalus would take things a little bit farther. He would prefer to be called a lady rather than a lord. He would wear makeup and wigs. It seemed he liked to cross-dress in women's clothing and go out to the town and try to pick up men. And this kind of stuff was seen by the Romans as very taboo. Elagabalus is even purported to have offered a reward for any physician within the Roman Empire who was capable of performing a sex change operation. Of course, the medical technology was not available at that point, so Elagabalus' dream of truly becoming a woman was never fulfilled, and all of this controversy on top of the religious controversy and the worship of the Black Stone in Rome meant that his reign was very short-lived, and he alienated himself amongst the Praetorian Guard and amongst his own grandmother, who eventually arranged for his assassination and replacement with her nephew, or with his nephew. So, yeah, it gets a little bit messy. I mean, getting assassinated by your own grandma? That's rough. But it's a very cool and interesting episode of history, especially with the first potentially trans Roman emperor. After Elagabalus' assassination, the Black Stone was brought back to its house in Syria, where his family line maintained the priesthood over the cult of Elagabal for several decades and centuries after this period. However, with the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire and the eventual persecutions against non-Christian pagan religions, the stone would no longer have been safe within Roman Syria. For a long time, the city of Emesa, the heart of the cult of the Black Stone, held out while other cities within Syria began to Christianize, like Antioch. The first few bishops to rule over Emesa actually had to stay outside of the limits of the town and had no jurisdiction within the city itself. But eventually, this would change, and Christianity and bishops and Christian authorities would make their way into Emesa itself, and the Black Stone certainly would not have been safe. Now, this is where our historical record becomes scattered, and we don't have any clear indication of what actually happened with the Black Stone. Certainly, it was not reported to have been dealt with by any Roman authorities, so it is reasonable to think that the stone was ushered out of the city in secret before the Christians came in. Now, where this Black Stone would have been taken to for safety is worth some consideration. Now, we already mentioned that it would not have been safe within the Roman Empire, as the anti-pagan, anti-idolatry tide among the Christians, the Roman Christians at this time, was near highs. Nothing was being tolerated, so they had to leave the Roman Empire. Now, the easiest way to do that would be to flee into the deserts. The deserts would have long been a bastion of these more traditional pagan belief systems. We already mentioned that there are several Kaabas within the Arabian deserts that were specifically asylums and safe places for icons and pagan gods. Now, this period of the more intense imposition of Christianity and the near zero tolerance of paganism is the late 300s to 400s AD. It isn't until about 200 years later that we see the birth and rise and life of Muhammad. Muhammad's family clan, the Quraysh tribe, took over Mecca and the Kaaba somewhere in the 500s and installed their own pagan god deity within the Kaaba as the chief deity of the city and the sanctuary, which was a site of pilgrimage even at that time. So it's very likely that whatever black stone was in the Kaaba was already in the Kaaba at this time. And when Muhammad finally leads his conquest of Mecca, he orders that all of the pagan gods and the icons within the Kaaba be destroyed, except for a select few, including the black stone. Now, the historicity of Muhammad's life and the events that are described in the Quran is mysterious and questionable about how much we can take from it and how much is based on actual historical facts. But I think I've made the case that it is at least plausible to think that this could be the very same black stone of Elagabalus that presides today within the heart of Mecca. Now, whether it's a fallen star, a meteorite, an embodiment of the sun god himself, this holiest relic of Islam is incredibly interesting. One final anecdote that I learned while researching for this topic was that the Black Stone has been destroyed and burned and damaged multiple times, but the very funniest of all of these was during an early Islamic civil war when one leader of the Quraysh tribe, the same tribe as Muhammad, took over the city of Mecca and was holding it in rebellion against the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyads came and laid siege, and the rebels in the city actually tried to defend the Kaaba by putting up a wooden structure around it and surrounding it with mattresses, making sure that it was safe. And apparently, a torch that was held by one of the rebels nearby accidentally caught in the wind, and the whole structure caught on fire and collapsed, and apparently the stone was shattered in this event. So pretty unfortunate for Islam's holiest relic, but no need to fear, it has been patched up since and put within a silver inlay within the Kaaba itself that the pilgrims all rotate around, like Muhammad is said to have 7 times. It is truly one of the craziest, most mesmerizing things to watch human beings do. And to see all of this reverence being directed, all over the world, prayers 5 times a day directed to this black stone, which could very well be the previous embodiment of the sun god El-Gabal himself, is just fascinating to think about. So that's the base theory for today, guys. I hope you like, share, and subscribe if you want more base theories and debates like this. And I'm thinking about having a poll in the community to see what topic you guys want me to cover next. So look out for that. Thanks and have a great day.